Hey guys, and welcome back to Monka, where Super Mario ensues, but yesterday I beat a game, and so I kind of want to talk about it because, that's how we get down on this channel, and honestly, I got some opinions about it as well, but yesterday the game I beat was Super Mario Bros. Wonder for the Nintendo Switch. Now, Mario Wonder came out on the 20th of October 2023, 3 days following the release of Sonic Superstars, but this one released on a Friday. The game is a Nintendo Switch exclusive, that is because it is published and developed by Nintendo, of course, and they only make games for their consoles, so therefore this is just a Nintendo Switch exclusive. Super Mario Bros. Wonder is a 2D side-scrolling Mario game, and the first 2D side-scrolling Mario game in about 11 years. Apparently Super Mario Bros. U came out in 2012, and that was the last 2D side-scrolling Mario game to come out, so it's been 11 years since the last one. That is, if you're not counting the Mario Maker games. In that case it'd have been 4 years because Mario Maker 2 came out in mid-2019, but Mario Wonder took me about 10 to 12 hours to beat. Now be mindful that that's to beat the game. That's not like to 100% do absolutely everything. I just kind of wanted to collect as much as I could through the levels that I had access to just playing through the game regularly. And that took me about 10 to 12 hours. And to be honest, I felt like that was a pretty fair length. But overall, the long and the short of my opinion on Mario Bros. Wonder is that it's a pretty fun game, to be honest. Now, is it, oh my god, best game of the year, just knocked my socks off? No. I think a lot of people are being very hyperbolic when they're putting this as like, oh my god, it's game of the year, or oh my god, it's like the best game ever. It's not. There are some flaws with it, but it's still nonetheless a very fun game and very charming and charismatic as well, and just a very fun experience that'll honestly put a smile on your face. But starting with the graphics and performance, honestly the graphics in Mario Bros. Wonder is actually pretty cool, to be honest. Kind of what I saw from the initial reveal trailer, it looked like it would be a bit different from like something like New Super Mario Bros., but it is pretty dramatically different from New Super Mario Bros., and I kind of like that because New Super Mario Bros. Kind of had a very generic 3D palette to it that kind of made it a boring looking game. The graphical aesthetic from Mario Bros. Wonder is actually pretty unique. It's hard to describe, but with that graphical aesthetic as well, they do a lot of cool things with the graphics, such as kind of lighting. It looks really good in Mario Bros. Wonder, and they use that to full advantage. And they'll also have like silhouetted modes and levels as well that look really good. They do a lot of things with the graphics that overall just make it look really pretty and impressive and make it look far better than something like New Super Mario Bros. And in terms of performance, it's a 2D side-scrolling Mario game, so honestly in terms of performance, it performs just fine. There's absolutely nothing to worry about there. But in terms of the graphics and performance, the graphics are actually pretty nice, and what they do with the graphics and lighting look actually pretty cool at points, and I can appreciate that even though I'm not all that crazy about graphics in video games. And the performance runs just fine because it's a 2D side-scrolling Mario game. Never had hitches, never had crashes or anything. It runs perfectly fine. But in terms of the music and voice acting, the music is actually pretty mellow, to be honest, and pretty nice. I enjoyed listening to it. As the most memorable Mario soundtrack I've ever heard, no, and I don't think I'll be remembering it for like years to come, like Mario Odyssey or Mario 64 or Mario Sunshine, honestly. Maybe it's just unfair comparisons. There are some really good songs in this game, but I don't think I'll be remembering them for like years to come. But the soundtrack is still good nonetheless. Now, that being said, I do have a small complaint about the soundtrack, and that's that they do reuse songs from previous games. They just remix them. Now, while they do remix them and that can be appreciated, some of these songs are really getting tired. Something like the Underground's theme in this game actually sounds really cool with the remix that they do, but I've been hearing the Underground theme of Mario Bros. Since I was like 4 years old when I originally played Mario Brothers on the NES. This is not a new song to me, and honestly, hearing it over and over again, I wish they'd try something new at least, like maybe make a new Underground theme. Like, I get it, but some of the songs can be kind of tired even though they are remixed. They sound good, but at the same time, if you've been playing Mario for like over 2 decades, you've been hearing these songs for a while. So the music in this game is good. I don't think it's anything crazy memorable, but it's still a good soundtrack nonetheless. Now, in terms of the voice actors, this is kind of where the game gets interesting, to be honest, because this has kind of been a point of contention for a lot of people. This is the first game to feature Mario not voiced by Charles Martinet, and features a person known as Kevin Afghani, and I guess he'll be taking up the mantle for the foreseeable future for Mario games as a voice actor. But honestly, for me, this isn't all that big of a deal. Charles Martinet had to retire at some point. He couldn't be the voice actor of Mario forever, and this new guy, Kevin Afghani, his voice acting is fine, and honestly, when I wasn't paying attention, I didn't really notice the difference at all. Now, that being said, I did play as Luigi pretty much throughout the entire game, and Luigi's voice actor is also, as far as I know, voiced by Kevin Afghani, and it honestly just sounds like the Luigi I used to know anyways. There's just slight points where you might notice a slight difference in the voice acting. Other than that, it sounds exactly the same, just slightly different. But I mean, for me personally, that's not really all that big of an issue. I think the new voice actor is doing a great job in picking up the mantle for voice acting Mario Luigi, and so I absolutely have no complaints in that department. The other characters as well sound fine in their voice acting. Princess Peach sounds a bit different, honestly. I don't know if that's a new voice actor as well, but that one sounded different as well. The Toads sound fine as well, and the Poplins and Prince Florian, which are some new characters, also sound fine. But in terms of the voice acting, the game sounds fine as well. I think the new Mario voice actor does fine in the role of filling the shoes of Charles Martinet, in my opinion. But in terms of the sound effects, which is the final point to mention, all these sound effects are pretty much just classical Mario with some new additions, and all of them sound fine, to be honest. I have no complaints in terms of the sound design. All of these sounds that I hear are all pretty familiar to me, and all the new ones sound fine as well. But overall, in terms of the sound department, I think the music is pretty good, to be honest, but I don't think it's anything crazy memorable. I think the voice actors are fine. I think the new Mario voice actor does pretty well in his new mantle and in picking up the role of being the new Mario voice actor, and the sound design is perfectly fine, and it has all these sounds that I know from previous games. But in terms of the story and characters, the story is a pretty basic one, but to be honest, I don't really care. It's a 2D side-scrolling Mario game, and so I'm really playing it for the gameplay, and the story just kind of is there to move the gameplay along. But the story is basically that Mario and company are visiting a kingdom known as the Flower Kingdom, which is inhabited by characters known as Poplins, which are kind of like toads, and is run by a Prince Florian. Now, of course, Bowser being Bowser, he has to come and crash the party, and he takes something known as a Wonder Flower, which transforms him into a big castle, or he pretty much takes over a big castle. Now, at this point, Bowser is building up power to pretty much take over the either Flower Kingdom or the world. I forget if that was specified or not. And so in their quest, Mario and company set off to collect 6 royal seeds to pretty much confront Bowser and take him down. The story is fine. To be honest, it's a Mario game, so I really don't care. It's just there to move along the gameplay, so I have no complaints in that department. It is kind of a charming story, though, to be honest, and I can appreciate that. It has that kind of Mario charm to it, and so I quite enjoy it. But in terms of the characters, they're all Mario characters. Prince Florian is a likable character, and as well the Poplins are likable characters, and pretty much a lot of characters from previous Mario games return, except for like Wario and Waluigi. For whatever reason they were left out, and the characters are pretty charming, to be honest. Now, the big one to talk about are the talking flowers, which are kind of like the new addition to the game. The talking flowers, while they kind of seem like they'd just be kind of a gimmick, are actually pretty likable, and their little quips and everything are actually pretty funny, and they add a lot of personality to the game. Now, when I saw the original revealed trailer and I kind of saw them, I'd be like, oh, it's just kind of a gimmick and they'll really add nothing to the game. But honestly, their little quips and everything and all the goofy shit that they say throughout the game, well, it seems like it wouldn't add a lot. It actually adds a decent amount of charm to the game and makes it quite enjoyable. And honestly, they put a smile on my face every time they'd say something goofy. But other than that, the other characters are pretty enjoyable. The Poplins are cool, I guess. I don't think they add too much to the game. And Prince Florian, kind of like the big main character that was added to the game, is likable as well. But in terms of the story and characters, the story is fine. It's just there to kind of move the plot along, but it is pretty charming. And the characters are all pretty likable, with the standout being the flowers, just because they just say a lot of stupid shit. But they say funny stuff that just kind of puts a smile on your face. It's not really cringy, it's just kind of more funny and laughable. But in terms of the gameplay, the meat and potatoes of Mario Bros. Wonder, starting off with the overall world, the game has kind of an overworld with 6 main worlds to it. This is kind of where one of my other complaints come to, because honestly, these worlds aren't anything too crazy creative, to be honest. They kind of feel like they're retreading old ground that it's already been kind of treaded in previous Mario games. So they kind of have like a pipe world that kind of feels like the Mushroom Kingdom levels in a new Super Mario Bros. Game. They kind of have a cloud area, which is kind of unique for the game, but they also have like a desert area and like a mushroom area, and as well an underground level area, which is kind of retreading old ground, to be honest. It's a minor complaint because they do enough to kind of mix it up and make it feel different, but these worlds kind of feel like they're retreading old area, but it's kind of a minor complaint. But since I did make the complaint about Sonic Superstars about it, I do have to mention it here, because otherwise it would be unfair for me to mention it there and not here. The worlds kind of don't feel as unique as they could, and they feel kind of like they're retreading old ground. But other than that, the overworld kind of feels something familiar to games I've played before in the Mario series. There is kind of an openness to it where you can actually roam around the areas and choose your levels and stuff like that. So it's not like a level to level thing where you move along kind of like a fixed trail. There are points in the game where it does that, but there are also areas in the game where you can kind of freely roam around and kind of discover secrets within the overworld, which is kind of cool. But the game has a decent amount of levels, to be honest, in it. The levels are usually not too long, to be honest, but they're still pretty good nonetheless and fun as well. Now, in terms of the characters you can play play, you can actually play a decent amount of characters. So you can play Mario, Luigi, you can play several sets of Toads, and as well you can play as Peach and Daisy, and as well as you can play as Nabbit and Yoshi's. Now Nabbit and Yoshi's are actually kind of like the easy mode of the game since they don't take damage, but they also cannot use power-ups. Mario, Luigi, the princesses, and as well the Toads can use power-ups, but they do take damage and lose lives and stuff like that. So the characters all control and play pretty much exactly the same though, besides, you know, the handicap that the Yoshis and Nabbits have. And honestly, in terms of control, they feel fine, to be honest. The characters have fine controls. They're pretty tight, I guess, to be honest, but I never felt like I was dying due to poor controls. Now, I pretty much played the entire game with the D-pad. I didn't really want to play with an analog stick, and the D-pad on the Joy-Cons kind of suck. That's kind of already a known issue though, but they do kind of suck, and it kind of makes the game a little bit harder to play at times just because that D-pad's crappy. But other than that, the characters control just fine. That complaint really is just on the Joy-Cons, less so on the game. But another kind of weird thing about the controls I guess kind of complain about is the fact that the dash button and jump button are right next to each other by default. It's kind of a weird sensation to where you're holding on the sprint button, you kind of have to roll your thumb to jump. It's kind of weird, but I got used to it over time. But as far as I know, you can modify controls to alleviate that issue though. But other than that, another thing to talk about are the power-ups in the game. Now, as far as I know, the only returning power-up to this game is actually the Fire Flower and the Star. Otherwise, they do 3 new power-ups for the game. They do the Bubble Flower, which gives you kind of like a bubble cap, which is kind of like a fire flower, except it shoots bubbles that travel slower, but they also travel through walls, but they do have a limited distance as well. As well, they have the Elephant Mushroom, which is pretty well known from the reveal trailer. It's nothing too crazy, but the kind of cool thing is when you become Elephant, Mario, Luigi, whatever, it actually changes the soundtrack, which is actually pretty awesome. It kind of adds like low brass into the soundtrack when you transform into an elephant, and so that's actually really unique and cool, and I can really appreciate that. Other than that, you kind of use a trunk attack, and you can also pick up water and throw it. It's cool, but it's nothing crazy in my opinion. I think the drill cap is kind of the coolest because in certain levels, the drill cap will allow you to burrow into the ground, whether that's underground or it's actually ground above you, and it allows you to traverse the level in some cool ways. So that's actually pretty appreciable. I like the fact that they actually kind of take some risks and do new power-ups. I think the new power-ups are overall pretty cool, but as well, they introduced something in this game called badges, which kind of replaces some of the power-ups from previous games. So you have something like a vine grappling hook, which is actually kind of cool that you can use to grab onto walls, or you have something like the flying cap where if you hit the button while in midair, it'll allow you to kind of float to the ground. Something kind of like Tanuki was kind of what I was thinking, and that was the power-up I used throughout the majority of the game because it was pretty useful. But there's also a triple jump badge, as well as like a radar that allows you to sense special objects within the area. These badges are pretty cool, but for the most part, I used the flying cap because it was by far the most useful power-up in my opinion. But other than that, talking about the level design, this is probably the coolest part of the game, to be honest, because the game does a lot of cool shit with the level design. I feel like this game took some inspiration from what they saw being used in levels from Mario Maker and kind of just took some of those ideas and put it into this game, because they have some puzzles in the game that are pretty cool. But as well, I think one of the coolest moments in the game are the musical moments in the game. Now, these aren't really like the music box segments in a Mario Maker game, but they do take the idea of kind of using music in a level and just take that and make really crazy moments in levels. And honestly, it's just hilarious and crazy at points when you're playing through the game, and just kind of like platforming and avoiding enemies and avoiding things is kind of rhythm based on the music, and you have like Piranha Plants singing or even Boo singing and shit like that. It really put a smile on my face and were just funny moments within the game. I kind of like those musical based segments that they have within levels just because it's funny and it's just really enjoyable and charming overall. But other than that, the levels also have other cool moments. They do a lot of cool new stuff, to be honest, that makes it feel a lot different from other games. So they have, like I said, moments where you're doing puzzling stuff, where you're doing musical moments, but as well you have the wonder flowers throughout the levels. These are kind of like the acid trips that you saw in the reveal trailer, and honestly they're a lot of fun, to be honest. This is where some of the musical moments come from, but as well they do a lot of creative shit with that just makes it really fun. You can transform into a Goomba for one, and you can also transform into some other enemies for others, and it just adds a really cool dynamic to the levels that makes them unique. And it's kind of funny to have these weird acid trips where all of a sudden the pipes are kind of crawling along with eyes on them, or you have like flying dragons, or you're walking on walls, or other crazy shit like that. I don't want to spoil too much, but honestly it's a lot of fun, to be honest, just to kind of have these weird trippy moments that are just kind of goofy, and at some points you even have the flowers just kind of commentating them, which just kind of makes it really funny. But within the level design, even outside the wonder flower moments, there's a lot of interesting unique things that they kind of do with the levels, whether that's kind of like a silhouetted mode, or or using lights to take out boos, or they do a lot of creative shit in this game, to be honest, with the level design, which I can really appreciate because I thought this game was going to feel a lot like just a generic 2D side-scrolling Mario game, but they actually do a lot of unique shit within the levels that makes it feel quite different from its predecessors just because they're doing a lot of new ideas within the game, and I can really appreciate that. Now as well with that, it also helps that they add new power-ups, and as well there's also a decent amount of new enemies within the game. So while there are the kind of old Goombas and Bullet Bills and Koopas, of course, they also introduce newer enemies that have interesting ways to take them out, which is kind of cool. As well, they have updated versions of older enemies, so homing Bullet Bills have been updated a bit, and so that's kind of a cool and appreciated thing as well. But the main goal and kind of the main gameplay loop is that you'll be collecting Wonder Seeds to progress through areas, pretty much to beat the bosses and beat the castles to collect the Royal Seeds, so you can eventually get to Bowser and have the final battle. But it's a decent gameplay loop, to be honest. I didn't really mind it, and it never felt egregiously challenging to me, to be honest, but that's fine because I kind of like the lighthearted and easygoing experience in this game. Now there are hard levels in this game. I think it's called the Special World, where there's some really hard levels. I think I tried one level of that area and I kind of just gave up on it because honestly I didn't want to have the frustrating experience of this game. I kind of like the light and easygoing experience of this game that I had, but other than that, the only other things I really want to mention are bosses and lives. The bosses are nothing really crazy. Pretty much throughout the entire game we'll be fighting Bowser Jr., and his boss battles are nothing really all that crazy, to be honest, but they're fun nonetheless, but they're really nothing crazy in terms of boss battles. And the final boss battle really is nothing over the top either. I don't even think die one time to any of the bosses. That could be a complaint for some, saying that the bosses aren't really all that hard, and honestly they're not, and honestly the bosses aren't really all that creative either, which I guess could be a complaint. But other than that, the only other thing I really want to mention is the live system. The game does have a live system, but honestly it's nothing egregious really because the levels aren't all that hard. I did end up maxing out and hitting 99 lives within the game, and there were some levels that kind of challenged me that took a lot of lives, but I never felt like there was any point where I'd run out of lives in the game, and so it kind of seems like a meaningless number. Now if there's something I can give to Sonic Superstars is that they removed lives, and so I can kind of appreciate that because honestly the live system nowadays is kind of a pointless system. It is within this game, but to be honest I'm not going to ding points off of it because it's kind of arbitrary because you can max out lives so easily that you'll probably never game over, to be honest. But overall in terms of the gameplay, this game is actually pretty fun. Now it is pretty easy, but it just has a lot of fun within it, and it's doing a lot of unique things for a 2D Mario game. It's actually pretty surprising, to be honest, because I thought this was going to feel a lot like other Mario games, but it actually does a lot of unique stuff. It feels a decent amount different, and honestly it was just a fun and enjoyable time overall, and it was a very charming game. But overall my opinion on Mario Bros. Wonder is that it's a very fun game, to be honest. I would definitely recommend checking it out just because it's a very lighthearted and easygoing time. It has a lot of charm, charisma to it that just makes it a lot of fun, and it's just an enjoyable time overall. It's lighthearted, and honestly it had me smiling pretty much throughout the entire game. But something I'd be excited to see in the future is how this could be implemented into something like Mario Maker 3. They could really take ideas, enemies, a lot of stuff from this and put into a Mario Maker 3 and give it to the people and give people a lot of tools to just do a lot of cool shit with this. But wrapping this video up, I feel like it has to be mentioned. These two games released within the same week, and this is really well known. This released on the 17th, this released on the 20th, and I played both now at this point, as you know, because this video would have came out before this one, and so I really had to mention it, even though I feel like some people are going to be like, oh, why you got to mention it, it's kind of petty or whatever. But these two games did come out the same week and they cost the same price, so which one was better in my opinion? Well, I think my opinion is pretty well known on Sonic Superstars, and I've now made my opinion known on Mario Bros. Wonder, but I think Mario Bros. Wonder came out on top overall, and honestly I didn't expect it, and that's the thing I really want to say about this. I did not expect to really like Mario Bros. Wonder as much as I did. I really enjoyed this game. I expected my experience with Mario Bros. Wonder to be the experience I was going to have with Sonic Superstars, so to have this experience with Mario Bros. Wonder was actually pretty surprising. But out of these two games, if I had to pick one, I would definitely pick Mario Bros. Wonder. I'm not trying to put down Sonic Superstars, and it probably does sound like I am putting it down, and I did make a pretty harsh critique of the game when I made my video, but since they did release within the same week and they both came out at the same time, I really do have to mention them in a light like this, just because it has to be known that there is one that's better out of the two, and it's Mario Bros. Wonder in my opinion. I just found Sonic Superstars underwhelming in my opinion, but I didn't want to end off the video on a negative note, but I felt like it just had to be mentioned. Since they did come out within the same week, the comparison was kind of inevitable to which one kind of won the war of the 2D platformers within the week. In my opinion, Mario Bros. Wonder kind of won that. To my surprise, like I said, I expected in my personal tastes for Sonic Superstars to win. But thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I'll see you. Stay chill.